But today we're going to get an opportunity to hear a story. Tommy preached in the first service, and I tell you, hearts were moved. And so I want you to welcome, I want you to encourage, I want you to walk alongside and cheer for our brother as he comes to share his heart today. Tommy, you want to come on out here? I got a family that would love to cheer for you. Awesome. All right, brother.
Well, good morning, CTK. I'm sad that I'm leaving Bellingham. I finally got used to the weather now. So now I'm going to go back to humidity and 90 degrees and 3-hour traffic, but for 10 miles. But I've been very blessed here. It's my first time in this area, or at least staying here for this long. And I'm incredibly blessed by the community of everyone here and just how warm everyone is here. And just recently, Pastor Grant asked me, so why is it that you do what you do? And I had to think about it because, when you're doing something, sometimes you don't think about why you do it anymore. For me, I've been doing some kind of ministry for around 15 years. So we moved over and it's been 11 years now. I have 4 kids and things have progressed. And I had to ask the Lord, why do I do what I do? And it reminded me of a time that my friend came over to the Philippines. And we were inside of a shuttle, or a larger bus, and then we were driving to these different locations. And he said, man, Tommy, I just remember when I first met you. And I was like, oh, yeah. So in my head, I kind of remember that. I was like, yeah, I remember when I first met you. And he said, yeah, I had to follow up on everyone that you talked to. And I said, oh, really? What do you mean? He's like, well, I just didn't know what was going to come out of your mouth. So I was like, oh, yeah, I guess so. And then I remembered, oh, yeah, I was bald. I was a cocaine dealer that got saved. I just, had this radical encounter with Jesus, but I was still really rough. Right? By the time I was 21, I didn't need my fake ID anymore because I got so sick of drinking. So I got into drugs at 12 years old, and then now I'm in church. So, you just imagine that. I'm barely dressed up for it. I'm dressed up like I'm almost on the street. And then he says, yeah, I just didn't know what was going to come out of your mouth. But you kept on bringing all of these new people to church. People would get saved. Your gang member friends would get saved. They would come into the church, and we would all be watching it. And then I would look at him, and I'm just listening to him talk. It's like, yeah, because sometimes you would talk to girls, and then sometimes you would talk to these other guys. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. And it made me remember the type of patience somebody needed for me when I just came to the Lord, when I was just a little seed. And I'm going to explain this a little bit more. And then he said, but then he backs off for a second, then he pauses. And he says, yeah, but it was so beautiful to see where you came from to where you are now. And he just kind of waited. His favorite movie is Lord of the Rings. I like the book, but it's hard for me to watch the movie. And then I was like, why do you like that movie so much? He's like, because it's about friendship, right? It's about brothers, and it's about how people grow up together, and they trust each other, and they learn that through the whole process. And then when he looked at it, I was like, man, here's one of my friends I've had for almost 20 years that stuck to me through thick and thin. And one of the greatest joys he has is seeing people grow up in the Lord. And that was where it struck me, being on the mission field, where I was like, yeah, actually, that's why I can't leave as well. That's one of the reasons why it's so hard for me to leave, because I see the transformation that's in there. And this took me back to Isaiah 61. If you look at your right up here on the screen, I've been reading Isaiah 61 for more than a decade. It just always strikes me, the different parts of it, where someone's a captive, then they're beauty for their ashes, then they become an oak tree. And it became something that was a little bit of a reminder and a compass of what God can do wherever you are. And I looked at it, and what struck out to me was verse 11. It says, for as the soil makes the sprout come up, and a garden causes seeds to grow, so the sovereign Lord will make righteousness and praise spring up before all nations. And what we see here is, first there's a seed that is planted, and then it starts to grow in what God has for us after salvation. And then it truly begins growing into the tree where it has fruit. It no longer just receives, but it also gives. It becomes a shelter for so many people. And I've looked at this, and seeing this process over people's lives has always been one of the greatest joys I've had. So I'm going to break it down a little bit here. If we look at Isaiah 61, verse 1 through 3, the first one is a seed to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners. If you could think through the first time in your life where you may have had darkness, right? It may have looked a little different in your life. It could have been a career path that you didn't like. It could have been a relationship that you're in. It could have been even a tragedy that you constantly had to live in. For me, it was a lot of addictions. It was a lot of drugs. It was a lot of a cult-like background in a gang. But there's a moment where when you open the prison door, light starts coming in. If you can imagine it, it's like a dungeon that is so dark that even when your eyes adjust, it's still dark. But when the light of Jesus comes inside of your life, everything begins to brighten up. Everything starts to make sense. All of the layers start to show itself in so much quality of life that you never had before. And then it doesn't end at that moment, right? It doesn't end at the point where we see salvation in somebody's life. It goes a little deeper. And then it says, not only will I show them eternal salvation, but then also I will take their ashes and I will give them a crown. Right? The crown is a little bit of what we see here as a firstborn. And throughout the Bible, we can always see that God adopts people. He takes people in, but adoption was very different during these times. Adoption, back in the day, was more like a successor for a company. It was the assets, it was everything, it was the estate. It was everything that was going to be owned by this family. The person adopted is now going to be raised up to take it over. Versus more in modern day context, adoption sometimes takes the place that they're going to have, it's more compassion built a lot of times. Then they're grafted in and then they become one in the family, which is also true in this case as well. But there's an emphasis that not only will they have ashes, but they will be transformed into a crown where I literally make them an heir. Right? So they have an identity that's with the Lord after the darkness. And then it moves through. This is where you start seeing the sprouting. And I'm going to illustrate this in what we've been seeing in the Philippines. But this is where you see the sprouting of people's lives. And then it starts taking form more and more. Then we have the third part, which is growth. In verse 11, they will be called oak trees or oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. And now anyone that's prayed for such a long time for somebody's salvation, or even breakthrough, knows that once you pray for them, and you know, people must, I feel like even here, people must pray for hundreds of people, dozens of people on a regular basis. But when you see that breakthrough, so much of you doesn't want it to be fleeting. Right? Some of you prayed for a decade for a breakthrough in your family, for your kids, other family members, and then when you see the breakthrough, you don't want it to be a shadow of the time. You want it to be something that lasts their entire life. And that's what we're seeing here with growth, is that it's not a moment, but it's an oak. It's an oak tree that lasts thousands of years. And it's not crooked. It's not planted wrong. It's righteous. It's made right. And that's what we want to see in our family. We want to see our kids. I have 4 kids. I want to see them as oaks of righteousness. Whatever the storm, whatever the typhoon, whatever the earthquake, whatever is happening in their lives, whatever the struggle is that they are an oak of righteousness. And they're living out their gifts. They're beginning to become who they are in Jesus. So I have 2 stories here I want to share, and we're going to play that video. And it's about Ivan and Christine. So as you're watching it, I want you to think through how they're a seed, what God does with them as they grow, and then who they become at the end of their story. So let's go ahead and play that.
If you've ever been down the bustling streets of Manila, you'll see dozens, if not hundreds, of street kids coming to your car, walking down the sidewalks, asking you for money, trying to sell things. A lot of times, no one will ever think about who they are and who they're going to become in the future. But this one moment, one of our friends asked us, what would it take to take this street kid off the streets? And we thought about it, and we found him, we talked to him, and we learned that his name was Ivan. And when we came and introduced ourselves, he asked us, what do we do? And he wants to come and follow us and learn whatever we have to teach about this man named Jesus. A few months later, when he was 18 years old, he joined our schools. He became trained, being raised up as a leader, a world changer. Months later, he went on outreach, evangelized thousands of people with his testimony of meeting Jesus as a street kid. so many people were crying because he is just like any other kid we would have found on the street, but God is using him in such a powerful way. Right after that outreach, he asked us, I want to learn more about God. I want to learn more about the Bible, but he couldn't read and write. But we felt the faith that if he wants to learn about Jesus, why stop him? So our team came around him. We showed him the Bible audio. We showed him Bible Project, all of these different ways. He learned how to read in the process. And now, coming from where he came from, he could actually recite the storyline of the Bible from Genesis all the way to Revelation. And at this point now, he still wants to become a world changer.
When Claudia and I first arrived to the Philippines, we started learning about the horrors of child trafficking here. Children as young as 6 months old were taken in by their very own parents as they were persuaded that instead of making $4 a day, they would be able to sell their kids online for $100 an hour. Years later, we started seeing this more and more in the Philippines, where our team ended up meeting a young teenager in the red light ministry. Her name was Christine. She was brainwashed since she was a young kid. And when we started talking to her, we realized that she didn't know that she knew anything else besides this whole life that she was showed to. And so we took her in. One of our staff members actually brought her into the family, their own house with their kids, started preaching the gospel, evangelizing her, mentoring, discipling. And by the end of her point, she took one of our 6-month training schools, went on an outreach to unreached people groups and tribes, dedicated a portion of her life to these unreached tribal areas in the mountains and the rivers, and now has dedicated the rest of her life to reaching other women that are in trafficking in the Philippines. And here we have an amazing transformational story of a woman that was rescued, restored, and is now dedicated to rescuing other women and children that came from her lifestyle.
Amen. Yeah. I've heard that so many times, but never gets old, which is part of the message. So let's take that and see what it looks like in Isaiah 61 through the lens of it. So we see Ivan, which we have a picture of him when we first met him. Looks the same, but dress is different. I remember taking him to his first haircut, actually. Like the first time that he was able to sit down with a family and actually eat. When he could, it's so interesting when you see someone that has all of their rights taken away, and then all of a sudden they have a choice. Right? For his birthday, like I was sharing last week, he never had his own birthday present. So when we saw him and he got taken in, he always wanted Jordans. It was like just his biggest dream, and we brought him into the Nike store. We were able to show him, he could pick what color, and then he said, Kuya, Kuya, that's Big Brother. He said, Big Brother, Kuya, this is like a real store. And I'm like, yeah, it's a real store, and I feel so spoiled at that point. Right? I'm with my kids, and they're running around with their like little dresses and whatever is in their heart. And he's like, well, what do I do here? And I'm like, well, you buy a shoe. And he's all like, any shoe? And I'm like, yeah, because you could buy a used shoe in the Philippines for like $5. Plus it's fake and used, which is kind of interesting. But, right, so then he's used to seeing things like that, or he'll steal it. And at this point, if you've ever been in a store, you smell it. You smell a new shoe. His senses are coming alive because he's seeing what it's like to have freedom. And then he looks at it, and then he's like, oh, you could see it, right? It's almost like shopping for your kids. It's like he looks at it, and he just stares at this red Jordan. He's all like, oh. And then he walks it away. It's almost like he's processing, oh, it must be too good to be true. And then so we're walking, and he's walking, and he can't find something. Like, so what excites you? What shoe excites you? And he's like, well, I really want a red one. So there's this red one, and he keeps looking at. And then we asked him, hey, can you give us a red shoe, this Jordan here? And they say, sure, what size? And I said, so Ivan, what shoe size are you? He says, shoe size? And I'm like, man, it just hits you. You're like, he doesn't know his shoe size because he never shopped for a shoe. And then so we're standing in the gap here, and we're looking at him, and we're like, yeah, your shoe size, trying to make him not feel ashamed of anything. And I'm like, why don't we just try a bunch of shoes on and see what fits? So then he starts putting all these shoes on, and then you could see him put on the Jordans for the first time. Where he's so happy, it's so real for him. And, he lived this lifestyle where he was literally stripped naked for his whole life. He would make $1,000 a month, and then they would rob him for it. And then now he sees God is giving back to him. He looks at these Jordans, he puts them on, he has these little shades, and then my wife says, why don't you get a Jordan shirt? And so the Tagalog is ate for big sister, right? And he was like, ate, really? It's like, yeah, get a Jordan shirt. And he's like, wow. That's like the best, right? When you get a gift for someone that's thankful. And then he goes in and then he puts it on, and then you do what you do when you buy stuff. You say, why'd you try it on? And he's like, really? And I'm like, yeah, go try it on. So he goes to the dressing room, and then me and Claudia are just, we're just sitting there. Right? Stuff that we do for our kids all the time, but then for him, it's like the first time. He's like 18 years old. So then he comes out, and he's so happy. And then he asks me, Kuya, can I put my sunglasses on? And I'm like, you can do whatever you want, man. So he takes his sunglasses on, then he puts them on, then he just stares at the mirror. And you could tell that he's like, wow, this is me. Right? This is Ivan, who's not a slave anymore. You know what I mean? This is Ivan who has a family. This is Ivan who gets a gift on his birthday. And then, so it's so amazing seeing them as a seed that doesn't know, but then for the first time they get to see, wow, I'm more than what the world told me. I'm not someone that's a prisoner that's inside that sees darkness, but I see the light. I see that there's light in this world. And he goes and has dinner with us. And then every once in a while, he wants to talk to me a lot and play basketball, but I'm really bad at it. So he beats me barefoot. So if you ever meet Ivan and you want to play basketball, just do that. And then he sits down with me, and it's so interesting when he sits next to me and just looks at me. And he's like eating like this. And I'm like, hey, Ivan, what's up? And he's all like, hey, Kuya. And I'm like, yeah? He's like, I really want to do the Bible school. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's it's academic. You'll be doing your schooling for 3 hours a day. It's rigorous. It's not an introduction anymore, right? I didn't tell him any of that. But then in my head, I'm processing that. And I'm like, oh, okay. So politely I ask him, so how's the reading classes? Because he can't read. So then I ask him, it's like, oh, it's good. And then I'm learning a lot, but I really want to take the Bible school. And it's funny because, right, I have another kid, her name is Faith, she's 6, and then she's asking me for a pony. So I'm like, Faith, we're not gonna get a pony. And then she says, what about a horse? And I'm like, well, that's bigger, so you wouldn't be able to get a pony or a horse. She's like, why not? Can I just keep it in the back? And I'm like, she's like so cute, she's like this big. And she's like, yeah, why can't I get a horse? And I'm like, well, because it's like a horse. You know what I mean? Like we can't have a horse. So I'm trying to explain to her why she can't have a horse, but she always finds a reason why we can't have a horse. And then I have Ivan, who's asking me, Kuya, I really want to learn the Bible. And I'm like, you start thinking in your head, someone that's a practitioner, you're like, how are you going to run someone through a rigorous academic school that can't read, but really, really, really wants to get closer to Jesus? And you know inside of your heart, the only way he could really get closer to Jesus is if he gets the Word of God rooted inside of his heart. So then I started discussing with my team, we started talking, and then my team is like, people are being patient with him, right? Because he's like me. It's like he just came from where he came, and now he's in this community. And it's like, he has like 5-6 mentors on the base. Like everybody is teaching him this and teaching him this. He has a little bit of a tantrum once in a while and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, but what do you want to do? You're right? Like I just asked him, I just put it right, what do you want to do? He wants to learn the Bible, and what do you want to do? And they're like, they think about it. I said, why don't you pray about it and then just let me know. And me and my wife are really praying like, man, we gotta pray that they'll accept him. Because it's going to be a big load for the whole community to teach someone the entire Bible they can't read, on top of reading, right, and writing. So he goes through it, then they all come back and they say, all of a sudden his application in, he's going through it, he's so happy, and the school starts. And then we start getting all the reports, and it's pretty cool. You see people going that just had the basic phrases of the Bible, and then all of a sudden they have these 15-page, theses on Isaiah, or the gospel and Matthew and all these really cool things. And then I'm with Ivan again, and then Ivan comes up to me and he says like, Kuya, look. And then I'm, always curious what he's going to show me. And then he brings out this paper, and then he shows it to me. And then it's his name for the first time. And I have a kid that's like, learning how to read and write. Like, she's so young. And then she gets blessed to learn how to read, right? Because reading is so important. And then now I see Ivan, he goes up to me, and it's almost like everything that you want to be religious about just fades away. It's like all of the rigor, all of the academics, all of the stuff that you want to stay up late, making sure you get the right thing. All of a sudden you see like, hey, Kuya, look, it's my name. And then you see it and it's written almost like my 4-year-old kid. And then you're just like, wow, Ivan, I'm so happy that you could write your name. And he's so happy. He's like, yeah, I'm going to write the Bible now. And I'm like, yes, you are. Right? Whatever you're going to do, you're going to do it. Jesus is using you. And then we have this next picture of him where the whole class goes through, and he's literally written out the timeline with all of the names. From Genesis to the point in Joseph, and it goes into Revelation, the Old Testament, and he's in a suit. It's like the sweetest thing. It's oversized, right? But he's in this suit, if you look at the picture, and he's teaching us about the entire timeline of the Bible. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, wow, I'm so proud of him, right? That's like, he even asked me, Kuya, are you going to come? Are you going to come to my presentation? And I said, of course I'm going to come to your presentation. But I thought about it, I'm like, man, I'm really busy. I got a lot of stuff to do. And then I flashed back to all the moments where my parents weren't for my presentations, right? All of the awards, all the ceremonies, all the stuff that happened before I became a gang member. And I was like, my parents weren't for anything. And then I look at what God can do and when he redeems, and I'm like, wow, when I show up to this presentation, it will be like his family is watching him at his first presentation. And so he's in a suit, right? When was the last time you were in a suit for an essay? Right? He's in a suit. He's so happy. He takes out his timeline that you can see even in the picture, and then he starts going through it. And for me, I'm more than excited because I can see the transformation in him. But then he hits something that I think really surprises everybody. He starts talking about Joseph. And I was like, oh yeah, Joseph. That's in the Bible. And then he's like, yeah, Joseph was a slave. And then Joseph was sold. And then Joseph was given away. And then Joseph was raised up by God. And then his brothers and sisters, his family came back to him. And then God expected Joseph to bless them. And how I knew his story because he was also a slave. He's like sold this way. And I'm wondering how he's going to tie this together. And then he says, and that's what I want to do also. I see the Bible, Joseph, even though he was a slave, he became someone that was blessed. And he took that blessing and blessed his family. And then, he breaks in the middle of the presentation and says, I want to bless my family. I want to see my family. I want them to know Jesus. And he doesn't know too many English words, right? But he's speaking in English. He's like, I want my family to know Jesus. And the whole room just gets like, I have family issues. I think a lot of people have family issues, right? It's sometimes hard for me to pray for my family. And then I'm looking at him, this brand new disciple of Jesus who's been sold his whole life. The Holy Spirit is working in him so much that he wants his family to know Jesus. And I'm just like, everyone's just kind of stunned by it. And then we're listening to him and listening to him. And then, by the way, if you think about it, this is the next part. He begins growing, right? He begins preaching the gospel to thousands of people. He starts sharing his testimony. But I think one of the parts that are really powerful about his story is that he comes up to me again, and I'm curious what he's going to say, right? He's like, Tommy, Kuya. I'm like, yeah, yes, Ivan. And he's all like, will you come to my birthday? Last birthday was with me, right? So I'm curious what he's talking about now. And he's like, yeah, come to my birthday. And I'm like, sure, as long as I don't play basketball. But he's all like, yeah, so what's happening? And he's all like, my parents are coming. Like my family, they're coming to the campus. And I was like, wow, you're bringing your family to the campus and you're seeing them, and he's so happy. Right? And there's things like a childlike faith that are undeniable when you see them. And so when you think of Ivan, please keep him in your prayers. Pray for his family, right? Pray for his healing, pray for his restoration, but pray for his growth. As now he went from a seed to someone that has broken the soil of his identity, and then now he's seeing his family like Joseph being restored. And Ivan is like this miracle worker. It's like you want the best for him, and then he always gets it. Right? You ever pray about something so big, you're almost like, I don't know if that's going to happen. And then Ivan just got that gleam in his eyes when you see him, that you're like, yeah, maybe God's going to do that. And so when you see him pray about his family, pray for them to be reunited, he's now become a little bit of a little celebrity in his area, actually. Because now when he comes back to his area, he's like feeding the poor. He's doing all this ministry work. He's like preaching the gospel. He's doing all of these different things, and all of these drivers and locals, they know him. They're like, Ivan, why are you here? Who are you with? And then he's like, oh, this is my family. Like he has a whole new life. So pray for him as he begins growing in that. Now let's go to the next one with Christine. Christine, if you look at the life of someone that often gets into this kind of work of prostitution, you have different types of streams. Some of them are more localized. Other ones are with syndicates and organized crime. With Christine's case, she's closer to the province. So inside the province, it's pretty much like almost 100% localized. So when you go down to our street, there's literally all of these brothels just going down. And they're unashamed about it. There's just red lights everywhere. It's illegal, but the mayor owns them. So then he can do whatever he wants, right? So it's a provincial capital for prostitution where we are actually. And then we go in there, and then we start talking to them. We start asking them, what is it that you do in your life and all these different things. The idea there is that you could buy them for a night. So for $40, you could actually have them for the whole night. So somebody has this dream and this vision and idea where they say, I want to buy as many women as I can for my birthday. And then for all of these other staff and students, they're all thinking, like, why don't we all just put money in? So what we start doing is we just start buying all the women inside of the brothel for an entire night. And then so you meet all of these different types of people, mothers, widows. You hear such horrific things. And then we talk to this one girl, Christine, and then we ask her, so why are you here? It said, I have friends that are in here. Then our team's asking him, so if you could show the picture of Christine here, when she's 12 years old, if you can imagine it. They're telling her, oh, this is how you make money. And then she's 12 years old, her family abandoned her. She doesn't have anyone to talk to and process wisdom with. And then they tell her, like, yeah, this is how you can make money. This is how you can go to college. So from that age, she starts learning, okay, this is the way women are treated. So this is how women make money. It's a bit like a cult again, right? They're being brainwashed into this. So we meet her right when she gets to the point of 17 years old. And then we ask her, what do you want to do with your life? And she said, I want to be a college student because this is the only way I could make money. If you get a job in this local area of the Philippines, it's around $4 a day. Then they always fire you after 6 months so they can rotate you, so that you don't have benefits, your contract is more of not a freelancer, but it's something you can't build your life on. But if you are a woman that sells yourself like this, then you can make $40, $100, $300 a night, depending on what's happening. And so we bring them into this outreach that we've been doing, and then we take them to an actual banquet. And then we have everything dressed up. People have made all of these little bracelets. They make these diadems that say things like daughter of God, beautiful, all of these pieces of identity. And then when they walk in, they're so shocked. Like they don't know what's going on. And then we start with worship, and at first they're like wondering what's happening, but it feels different. It feels different than any other night. And then when we actually showed a movie of The Chosen with the woman at the well. And it was this one moment where they were speaking Tagalog. We have the whole thing translated in the Filipino language, Tagalog. And then they start watching it, and I felt like the Lord was telling me that they don't know what a man looks like when they're gentle, when they listen, when they pay attention to you. And so here you have these women watching this Jesus series, and then they're looking at Jesus talk to this woman caught into adultery. And they find themselves in that story. They find themselves disqualifying themselves, being ashamed, being embarrassed. But then they look at Jesus and they're like, wow, Jesus actually accepts me for who I am. Jesus wants to see me transformed. Jesus came all the way so that they could see me here. And then we start the conversations. And then so many women start saying, we want to leave. We don't believe we're supposed to be here. We don't think that, we think there's a better route. We've had women that were making money in prostitution, but then now they have kids and they leave it for a job of $4 a day or $6 a day or $10 a day, simply for the fact that they now know their identity is no longer in what the world told them. And this is where you see the sprouting, right? The sprouting is when they start seeing the light and breaking through the toughness is what they have. And then Christine, one of the most amazing ways that we've seen her do this is that when she was with our campus, our home that we have, our family, if you show the picture of it, is that she was just sitting with a community. She was just talking with us. She was just having jokes. She's funny, she's smart, she has a future, right? There's so many things that the rest of the world will tell her that she does, but she doesn't live in. And now with her sprouting, she's actually able to see, wow, this is what my new life looks like. And then we get into the final stage of it, which is the growth. And then you see them starting to learn that they're accepted. You start seeing them being transformed. You start seeing the fruit of the Spirit and salvation inside of their life. And then we get to the third part, which is her growing into her own tree. And now she starts really hearing from the Lord. Now she starts getting her own prayer life. And she goes in and then she says, I wanna work in the red light ministry. And so we're thinking about all the ramifications of that. And then we're asking her, where do you feel the Lord's leading you? And she says, I feel like the Lord's leading me in Angeles City. So Angeles City is very different than where she grew up. Angeles City is literally like mafia. So you can't go in there unless you look like you're gonna use there or you're gonna become a worker there. So then she leaves, she goes in there, she joins a restoration home, and then she dedicates her life so that she could actually become another giant slayer. She could become someone that grows up with the same testimony and heartache that she had, but now she's seeing a radical shift in what's happening inside of her life. And so when we look at all of these things together, it starts piecing together the seed, the sprout, and the growth of these individuals. And for me and my wife, it's been a long 10 years. It's been 70, 80 hours working week. It's been a lot of hair that I've lost personally. She hasn't lost too much hair. And then it's been a long turn. When we came first to the Philippines, we had 3 other staff. And then most of those staff changed out and then came back in, but me and my wife were always there. First month, we had our first miscarriage. That was our entrance into the field of the Philippines. And then the second time, we had this amazing outreach. In the Philippines, you actually have an open door with all of the public schools. So they have value formation, and they're Catholic by religion. So if you have the gospel, but it's inside of the Bible, they'll allow you to use values for the gospel. And then you could bring it into the public school. So here we have around 120 short-term missionaries. Then they come in, and we preach the gospel to around 120,000 youth. Within the first month, they have 13,000 kids that are coming into the program. And then we're coming in for a celebration. And then at this moment, I'm quite stressed out. I'm trying to wonder, I'm setting up the AVL, I'm setting up the outreaches, I'm setting up the schools. This is the 5th year that we've been on the field already. It keeps on getting more tense and more tense. And then if you're married or you're a couple, you know where the stress of work goes. The first place it goes is to your wife. The first place it will go is your home. And so here we have this massive harvest, but then at home I'm so stressed out all the time. And then me and my wife were almost, she's not arguing with me, but I'm kind of arguing with her for some reason. So I'm just really stressed out. We're driving 3 hours into the city. And then I always think about it. Was it the stress? Was it something else? And then right before I get out of the car, she starts sharing with me that I'm starting to feel my stomach. Like there's something happening in my stomach at this moment. And then when I look at her eyes, I know it's the first time she had that look was when she had a miscarriage. And I looked at her and I'm trying to think about, out of all of these things that are happening, why does this keep having to happen? And so we go into the service, we go into the ministry, and then I start sharing about everything that's happening. And then when she comes in, that night, we actually have the miscarriage that night after the harvest. And then I look at it, we're weeping for almost a week or so. And then we're looking for a place that we could actually bury our child. And then the one place that we look at is this tree that's on the campus if you look at it. So we have a picture of it. And then amongst this tree, there's a place that we knew that whatever we do on the campus, nothing's ever going to happen. And so we bury Mateus, our second baby there. And then right after that, we have our third baby. And then when we sit there, we're always wondering, Lord, what's going to happen next? What's the cost of the calling? And I feel like that's something that we always have to think about. Whenever we think about the calling of God in our life, there's always a cost. Right? And it's usually never out of your abundance. Right? It's always going to take everything. The one thing out of the alabaster jar of Jesus and his feet that always strikes me is that there's this woman that saves up for an entire year and then goes to Jesus and then thinks about, what am I going to give God? And she pours out this alabaster jar that cost everything. And then Jesus looks at her and knows this is her form of worship. And when we think about the call of God that's in our life, those are the things that we have to measure. We have to ask ourselves, is this out of abundance? Is this out of a convenience? Is this out of a comfort? Or is this out of the everything that I have? Right? And then when we buried our baby for the first time, I really looked at that moment. And I thought about what it was going to cost for this mission. But when we buried our baby, we didn't know that that was going to become the place where weddings were, where baby memorials were going to be, where homes were going to happen. We had 5 staff when we started. Now we have around 60 that are on the campus coming in and out. We're hosting around 500 people. And that became a place of celebration. And so what I want you to think about is when we look at what the Lord has for us, it could be here in Bellingham, it could be in another city, it could be in another country. What would everything look like when we give it to Jesus? So let's go ahead and just pray about that for a moment. So Lord, I just thank you for everyone here, God. Lord, I thank you for the talents. I thank you for the giftings that everyone has. Lord, I thank you for the family that I found here in Bellingham and CTK, Jesus, and everywhere else in this region. And Lord, I thank you that the greatest joy that I've ever found on the field was when I gave everything and I've seen the transformation of these individuals, God. So Lord, I ask that we would find that same joy, whether it's with our children, whether it's for the people that we pray through, whether it's our coworkers, the people in our companies or our businesses, or our sports team. But Lord, we would be able to give that alabaster jar of everything that we have to see the multiplication of your glory to the ends of the earth. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.